when my daughter sweetly said, "You're too old to travel with us, Mom. Just watch the house." I smiled and waved them off, but after they left for their European vacation, I found something on the kitchen counter that changed everything. 4 plane tickets to Italy, paid for with my credit card. A sticky note in my daughter's handwriting read, "Booked with Mom's card. Will reimburse." That's when I realized I wasn't just being left behind. I was being used as their personal ATM. They thought I'd sit quietly at home like a good little grandmother. They were wrong. My name is Margaret Holloway, though everyone calls me Maggie. At 72, I've lived through enough to know when someone's trying to pull wool over my eyes, but somehow, I didn't see this coming from my own daughter. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window in our little coastal Maine home, painting golden squares on the worn linoleum floor. I just finished my second cup of coffee when Lydia breezed in with Aaron and the kids, their arms full of luggage and excitement crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. "Mom," Lydia called out, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant she wanted something but was trying to make it seem like she was doing me a favor. "We're just about to head out. I wanted to make sure you had everything you need while we're gone." I watched as she bustled around my kitchen, checking the refrigerator, testing the locks on the windows, all the while avoiding direct eye contact. Aaron stood by the door, scrolling through his phone, occasionally muttering about traffic and flight times. My grandchildren, Emma and Jake, were already in the car, their faces pressed against the windows, eager to begin their adventure. "You know, Mom," Lydia said, finally settling at my kitchen table, her manicured nails tapping against the wood. "We really did consider asking you to come with us, but honestly, all that walking in Europe, the time changes, the different food. I just think it would be too much for you. You're much better off here, in your routine, safe and comfortable." Safe and comfortable, as if I were a piece of antique furniture that might break if moved. "Besides," she continued, her smile never quite reaching her eyes, "someone needs to watch the house. You know how these coastal storms can be in summer, and Mrs. Henderson next door mentioned there have been some break-ins recently. We'd feel so much better knowing you're here, keeping an eye on things." I nodded, playing the part of the understanding mother, the one who'd spent decades putting everyone else's needs first. It was a role I'd perfected, the widow who baked cookies for church fundraisers, who never missed a grandchild's recital, who always had a spare bedroom ready and a pot of soup on the stove. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice steady as granite. "You all go and have a wonderful time. Don't worry about me." Lydia's relief was palpable. She practically bounced up from the chair, pecking my cheek with a kiss that felt more like punctuation than affection. "You're the best. Mom, we'll bring you back something nice. Maybe one of those scarves you like?" A scarf. As if a piece of fabric could make up for being deemed too old, too fragile, too much of a burden to include in family memories. Aaron finally looked up from his phone. "We should go. Traffic's getting heavy." They gathered their things in a whirlwind of motion, and I followed them to the door, my slippers shuffling against the hardwood as they loaded into their SUV. I stood on my porch, the salt breeze from the ocean ruffling my gray hair. Lydia waved from the passenger seat, already turning to say something to Aaron. The kids were absorbed in their tablets. Not one of them looked back as they pulled away. I remained on the porch long after their car disappeared around the corner, listening to the gulls crying overhead and the distant sound of waves against the shore. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, loaded with all the things left unsaid. Returning to my kitchen, I noticed Lydia had left her coffee cup on the table, lipstick smudged on the rim. As I reached to clear it, I saw the corner of a thick envelope peeking out from beneath the fruit basket. My daughter, in her haste to leave, had forgotten to hide her tracks as well as she thought. That envelope would change everything, but standing there in my empty kitchen, I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the house felt smaller somehow, as if the walls had crept in while I wasn't looking, and the silence had teeth. The envelope was heavier than it looked, stuffed carelessly beneath the apple basket, as if hidden by someone in a hurry. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it free. Not from age, as Lydia might assume, but from a creeping sense of dread that crawled up my spine like ice water. Inside were 4 plane tickets, first class, Rome to Paris, Paris to London, London to Barcelona, a grand European tour that must have cost a fortune. My eyes scanned the passenger names: Lydia Morrison, Aaron Morrison, Emma Morrison, Jake Morrison. 4 tickets, 4 members of their perfect family unit. But it was the yellow, sticky note that made my blood run cold. There, in Lydia's distinctive handwriting, the same loops and curves I'd watched develop from kindergarten scrawls to business correspondence, were the words that shattered something inside me. Booked with Mom's card. Will reimburse. The question mark mocked me, as if it were a casual afterthought, a minor detail to be sorted out later, or perhaps never. I sank into my kitchen chair, the tickets spreading across the table like evidence of a crime. My reading glasses, the ones Lydia always commented made me look so old, suddenly felt necessary as I examined every detail, the booking reference, the dates, the price. Dear God, the price. My laptop sat on the counter where I'd left it after checking the weather last night. With movements that felt both urgent and dreamlike, I opened it and logged into my bank account. The familiar interface loaded slowly. Coastal Maine internet was never fast, and I held my breath as the recent transactions appeared. There it was. Airline charge, $8,437, posted 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of me not checking because I trusted my daughter. 3 weeks of her smiling at me, bringing me groceries, chatting about the weather while this theft sat between us like a malignant secret. I scrolled further. Hotel bookings in Rome, Paris, London, restaurant reservations, museum passes, tour guides, all charged to my card over the past month, cleverly spaced out so as not to trigger the fraud alerts. My daughter knew my banking habits well. I checked monthly. Not daily. She'd counted on that. The total was staggering, nearly $20,000. Will reimburse? I said aloud to my empty kitchen, my voice cracking on the words. The refrigerator hummed in response. The clock above the stove ticked steadily toward noon. I thought of all the times Lydia had commented on my fixed income, had worried aloud about my financial security in retirement, the conversations where she'd offered to help manage my accounts, to make sure everything was in order. I'd resisted, some stubborn part of me clinging to my independence. Thank God for that stubbornness now. But this wasn't just about money. The money could be replaced. I'd been careful with my savings, had invested wisely during my working years. This was about the calculation behind it, the deliberate exclusion. The assumption that I would discover this betrayal only after they'd returned, when it would be too late to do anything but accept their hollow apologies and vague promises of repayment. I picked up one of the tickets, studying Lydia's name printed in crisp black letters. My daughter, who I'd raised alone after Thomas died, who I'd sent to college by working double shifts, who I'd supported through her divorce before she met Aaron. This was how she repaid that devotion, by stealing from me and leaving me behind like an old dog who couldn't make the journey. My phone sat silent on the counter. No messages asking if I was okay. No photos from the airport of excited grandchildren. Nothing, because in their minds, I had already faded into the background of their lives, a supporting character whose only remaining purpose was to fund their adventures and guard their empty house. I gathered the tickets and the sticky note, placing them back in the envelope with careful precision. Evidence. That's what this was now. Evidence of who my daughter had become, or perhaps who she had always been beneath the performance of daughterly duty. The house creaked around me, settling in the afternoon heat through my window. I could see Helen next door hanging laundry, her movements efficient despite her 78 years. She'd mentioned yesterday that her son was taking her to Alaska next month. Always wanted to see the glaciers, she'd said with a girlish smile. I wondered what it felt like to have children who saw you as a person still capable of wonder, rather than a convenient combination of bank account and security system. The envelope sat before me like a question waiting to be answered. They thought they knew me so well, thought they could predict my every move, my every reaction. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I didn't call Lydia, didn't send a text demanding an explanation, didn't play the role of the hysterical mother she'd probably prepared Aaron to handle. Instead, I poured myself another cup of coffee, my third, but who was counting? And sat down at my laptop with the kind of calm that comes from absolute clarity. The bank's customer service line rang 4 times before a cheerful voice answered, "Good afternoon, this is Patricia. How may I help you today?" "I need to report fraudulent charges on my credit card," I said, my voice steady as steel, "and I need to freeze the card immediately." "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Mrs. Holloway. Let me pull up your account right away." As Patricia worked through the security questions, I stared at the tickets spread before me. First class. They'd used my money to fly first class while telling me I was too fragile for coach. "I see the charges you're referring to," Patricia said after a moment. "These airline and hotel bookings from the past month, shall I dispute all of them?" "Every single one." "And you're certain you didn't authorize these purchases?" "Completely certain." The process was surprisingly quick. Within minutes, the card was frozen, the charges flagged for investigation. Patricia assured me the temporary credit would be applied within 24 hours while they investigated. I thanked her and hung up, feeling the first spark of something that wasn't quite satisfaction. Not yet, but close. My phone began buzzing at exactly 2:47 p.m. I knew because I was watching the clock, waiting. They would have discovered the frozen card at the airline check-in counter. First-class passengers don't wait in long lines, so the revelation would have come quickly. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. The second call came 30 seconds later, then a text. "Mom, something's wrong with your card. Call me ASAP." Then Aaron tried calling. Another text from Lydia. "Mom, we're at the airport. There's been some mistake. Please call immediately." I sipped my coffee and opened a new browser window. The airline's website loaded slowly, but I was in no hurry. I had all the time in the world, unlike my daughter, who was presumably standing at a check-in counter with a line of impatient travelers behind her. The booking reference from the tickets worked perfectly. There they were, 4 first-class seats on a flight departing in 3 hours. The cancellation policy was strict. No refunds for first-class tickets canceled within 24 hours of departure. But that didn't matter. I wasn't looking for a refund. I clicked Manage Booking and then Cancel Reservation. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this reservation? This action cannot be undone and no refund will be issued." I clicked Confirm. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma calling from Lydia's phone, a clever strategy, using the grandchildren. But I'd been manipulated enough for one day. The hotel reservations were next, one by one. I logged into each booking site using the confirmation numbers from my credit card statement. The Park Hyatt in Paris, the Savoy in London, the Hotel Arts in Barcelona, all canceled. Some would charge cancellation fees, but those would be charged to a frozen card. My phone had become a symphony of notifications, calls, texts, even an email with the subject line, "Urgent, please respond." I turned it face down on the table and refilled my coffee cup. It was fascinating, really, how quickly the facade of caring daughterhood crumbled when money was involved. No more sweet concerns about my health or safety, just demands, just panic, just the raw entitlement of someone who'd grown so comfortable taking from me that being denied felt like theft. I picked up the phone one more time, not to answer their increasingly frantic calls, but to dial the airline again, this time. I navigated to the executive desk. "I recently discovered fraudulent bookings made with my credit card," I explained to the representative. "I've canceled the reservations, but I want to ensure those passengers are flagged in your system. They may try to rebook using another stolen card." It was perhaps petty, but pettiness, I was discovering, had its own particular satisfaction when served cold. By 4 p.m., The calls had stopped. Either their phones had died, or they'd finally understood that I wasn't going to answer. I pictured them in the airport, surrounded by their luxury luggage, trying to explain to the children why they weren't getting on the plane, trying to figure out how to afford 4 last-minute tickets home. The silence in my kitchen was different now. Not the oppressive quiet of abandonment, but the peaceful calm of a storm that had passed overhead without touching down. I straightened the papers on my table, washed my coffee cup, and wiped down the counters. Then I sat back down at my laptop and opened a new search window. Flight deals from Portland, Maine. I typed. It was time to do some booking of my own. The drawer had been calling to me for years. Third one down in my bedroom dresser. Beneath the sensible cardigans and wool socks, I called it my what-if drawer, though I'd never said those words aloud. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper like relics from another life, lay my old passport, a manila envelope of foreign currency I'd collected over the years, and a small stack of postcards I'd bought but never sent. I spread them across my bed now. These artifacts of dreams deferred, a sunset over Santorini from a Greek restaurant calendar, the northern lights from a National Geographic Thomas had brought home once, cherry blossoms in Kyoto from a card Emma had made me in 3rd grade, carefully copying the image from a library book. When I retire, I used to tell Thomas, we'll see the world. When the kids are grown, we'd promised each other, when we have more saved up, when things settle down. Well, Thomas had been gone for 12 years now. The kids were grown enough to steal from me. Apparently, I had money saved. Quite a bit, actually, in accounts Lydia didn't know about. And things were never going to be more settled than they were right now, in this empty house that suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a beautifully appointed cage. I opened my laptop on the bed and pulled up the flight search results from earlier. But something made me pause. Rome, Paris, London, those were Lydia's dreams, not mine. She'd always been drawn to the grand cities, the famous hotels, the Instagram-worthy destinations. Even her theft had been predictable, conventional. I closed that tab and opened a new one. Barcelona, I typed just Barcelona. I'd read about it once in a book club selection, a memoir by a woman who'd walked the Camino de Santiago. She'd ended her journey in Barcelona, describing the city as a place where ancient stones held modern dreams, where you could lose yourself in the Gothic Quarter's maze of streets and find someone entirely new. The author had been 75 when she made the journey. I remembered Lydia scoffing at the book choice. Who wants to read about some old woman having a midlife crisis 30 years too late? The flight options loaded, direct flights were expensive, but there was a connection through Newark that left tomorrow evening. Tomorrow? The words sat in my mind like a dare. I thought about my garden, the tomatoes that would need watering. Helen next door would handle that. She'd been tending her own garden for 50 years and mine by proximity for the last 5. I thought about the library volunteer shift I had on Thursday. Mrs. Patterson could cover it. She'd been wanting more hours anyway. I thought about all the reasons to stay and found them as flimsy as tissue paper. The savings account I opened after Thomas died had been my secret, even from him. At first, squirreling away $5 here, $10 there from the grocery money, mad money. My mother had called it. Every woman needs something that's just hers. After Thomas passed and I sold his truck, paid off the house, settled his life insurance, I'd put the remainder in that account. Never touched it. Never even looked at the balance for years. I look now. More than enough for a one-way ticket to Barcelona. More than enough to stay for months. If I wanted. To find a little apartment with a balcony where I could drink coffee and watch the Mediterranean light paint the buildings gold. To take Spanish lessons from someone who wouldn't pat my hand and speak slowly like I was a child. To eat dinner at 9 p. like the locals and walk Las Ramblas at midnight. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it. 43 missed calls, 18 text messages. The last one from Aaron. This is cruel. Margaret, think of the children. Cruel. cruel, as if using my credit card without permission and leaving me behind wasn't cruel, as if reducing me to a watchdog and a wallet wasn't cruel, as if every "Mom, you should rest" and "Mom, it's too much for you" hadn't been slowly poisoning me with their particular brand of kindness. I turned back to the computer and clicked on the flight. One-way ticket to Barcelona, leaving tomorrow at 6:15 p.m. The seat selection screen showed plenty of availability in coach. I'd never flown first class in my life, had always thought it a ridiculous extravagance. But then again, I'd thought a lot of things before today. My fingers hovered over the mouse. This wasn't just about a flight or a trip. This was about choosing who I would be for whatever years I had left. The mother who forgave and forgot, who made excuses and kept the peace, or someone else entirely, someone I'd caught glimpses of in mirrors when I thought no one was looking, someone who'd been waiting patiently for permission to exist. I selected seat 3A first class, window. The price was absurd. I paid it anyway, using my debit card linked to the secret account. The confirmation email arrived instantly, and I stared at it like a diploma from a school I'd never known I was attending. Margaret Holloway, passenger, departing tomorrow. Not mother, not grandmother, not widow, just passenger, heading somewhere she'd chosen herself, on no one's timeline but her own. The room felt different now, charged with possibility. I stood and walked to my closet, running my fingers along clothes chosen for practicality, for modesty, for blending in, at the very back, wrapped in plastic. Hung a red dress I'd bought on impulse years ago and never worn. Too young for me. I decided every time I'd considered it. I pulled it out now, shaking away the dust of judgment. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd wear red to the airport. Let them try to overlook me then. The morning came wrapped in fog, as if the coast itself were keeping my secret. I moved through my house with the efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime managing departures, though usually I was the one staying behind, waving from the doorway. My suitcase was older than Emma, a sturdy blue Samsonite that had mostly traveled between the attic and the basement. I packed light, the red dress, of course, and a few comfortable basics. My passport renewed last year out of stubborn optimism. The envelope of euros I'd been saving since a neighbor gave them to me after her own European trip. Maybe someday you'll use them. Maggie. Someday had arrived. I watered my plants thoroughly, leaving the blinds at just the right angle to let in morning light without scorching the leaves. The refrigerator held nothing that would spoil. I'd been shopping day by day since Lydia left, as if some part of me had known. I wrote out clear instructions for Helen on a yellow legal pad, which plants liked extra water, where I kept the spare key, the number for the plumber if the upstairs toilet acted up again. At the bottom, I added, "Gone for a while, we'll send postcards." I didn't write where I was going. Let the neighborhood speculate. Let them weave stories about sensible Maggie Holloway's sudden departure. They'd probably be more interesting than the truth. The taxi arrived at 4:30 p.m. Just as I'd arranged, I'd called Bobby's cab company, the local service that had been driving Maine folks to the Portland airport for 30 years. Bobby himself was behind the wheel, his familiar face creasing with surprise when he saw me with a suitcase. "Maggie Holloway, as I live and breathe. Where you heading?" "Airport," I said, settling into the back seat with my purse clutched in my lap. "Visiting family?" "Something like that." He chatted during the drive, filling the space with local gossip and weather predictions. I half listened, watching my neighborhood slide past the window. Chen's house with its immaculate garden, the elementary school where I'd walked Lydia every morning for 6 years, the church where Thomas's funeral had filled every pew. Each landmark felt like a released breath, a loosened knot. My phone had been mercifully quiet all morning. Either Lydia had given up, or she was too busy dealing with the chaos of her ruined plans to harass her mother. I'd turned off location services and disabled read receipts. If she wanted to track me down, she'd have to do it the old-fashioned way. At the airport, Bobby insisted on getting my suitcase from the trunk. "You take care now, Maggie. And hey," he paused, studying my face with the intuition of someone who'd driven plenty of people away from their lives. Good for you. I tipped him generously and walked through the automatic doors into the bright chaos of the terminal. Check-in was a revelation. The first-class line was empty. The agent's smile genuine rather than harried. She complimented my dress. I'd changed into it that afternoon, applying lipstick in a shade called Fearless that the salesgirl had talked me into months ago. "Traveling alone today, Mrs. Holloway?" "Yes," I said, and the word felt like a celebration. Security was simple. I'd remembered the rules. Liquids in bags, shoes off, laptop out, the TSA agent, a young woman with kind eyes. Wish me a good flight. I floated through it all like I'd been doing this my whole life, like I was the kind of woman who jetted off to Barcelona on a Tuesday evening just because she could. The first-class lounge was another universe entirely. Soft chairs, complimentary wine, newspapers in multiple languages. I settled near a window where I could watch planes lift into the clouding sky, each one carrying its cargo of dreams and destinations. A notification popped up on my phone, an email from my bank confirming the fraud investigation was complete and the temporary credits had been made permanent. $20,000 back in my account. I smiled and deleted the email. Money was just money. What Lydia had really stolen and what I was now taking back was worth infinitely more. A text came through as I sipped my wine, not from Lydia this time, but from Helen next door. "Saw the taxi. Bobby's wife says you're at the airport. Good for you. Honey, water your plants every 3 days, not every 2 like you wrote. I know you love them, but you'll drown the poor things. Wengsex. I typed back, "Thank you," then added, "Really, for everything." The boarding announcement came at 5:45 p.m. First class, priority boarding. I gathered my things and walked to the gate, my sensible pumps clicking on the polished floor. The gate agent scanned my ticket with a practiced smile. "Enjoy your flight to Barcelona, Mrs. Holloway." I paused at the jet bridge entrance, looking back at the terminal. Somewhere in this same airport yesterday, Lydia had discovered that her carefully laid plans had crumbled. Somewhere in this city, she was probably sitting in her living room, staring at her phone, wondering how her mother, her predictable, manageable mother, had done something so unexpected. Let her wonder. I turned and walked down the jet bridge, my shadow stretching long behind me. The flight attendant at the aircraft door welcomed me aboard, gesturing toward the first-class cabin. "Right this way, Mrs. Holloway. Can I get you some champagne once you're settled?" "Yes," I said, finding my window seat and sliding in like I belonged there. "That would be lovely." Barcelona embraced me like an old friend I'd never met. The Mediterranean light was different from Maine's coastal glow, warmer, more golden, as if the sun itself were Spanish and taking its time. My hotel was a small boutique property in the Gothic Quarter, chosen not for its stars, but for its description, a haven for travelers seeking authenticity over amenities. The narrow streets twisted and turned like thoughts, leading me past centuries-old churches and tiny bars where locals nursed morning coffees that put my weak American brew to shame. I'd been here 3 days now, each one stretching luxuriously without the rigid structure of meal times and obligations that had defined my life for decades. My phone had become a curious artifact. It worked perfectly. I could see the messages piling up, the missed calls accumulating like snowdrifts. Lydia had progressed through stages, anger, demands, guilt, and now a kind of wounded fury that leaked through even in preview texts. "How could you do this to us? The children are asking for you. This is not the mother I know." She was right about that last part. This wasn't the mother she knew. That mother was sitting in a Maine kitchen, watching the hours pass, waiting for permission to live. I kept the phone on only to document my journey, taking photos not for social media. I'd never understood the compulsion to broadcast every moment, but for myself. The morning light on Park Güell's mosaics, an elderly couple dancing to street musicians near the cathedral, my feet, toes painted shocking pink at a salon where the esthetician didn't speak English and I didn't speak Catalan, but we understood each other perfectly. On my fourth morning, I found a cafe that would become my regular spot. The owner, Maria, was perhaps 60, with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon and eyes that missed nothing. She brought me cortado without asking and settled into the chair across from me during the quiet morning hours. "You are running from something," she said on our third morning together. It wasn't a question. "Running to," I corrected, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. She smiled, the kind of smile that held stories. "Ah, even better. Most people my age, they run from... But you have the look of someone who finally opened the cage door and remembered she had wings." My phone buzzed on the table between us. Another call from Lydia. Maria glanced at it, then at me. "My daughter," I explained. "And she is angry you are here?" "She's angry I'm not where she left me." Maria laughed, a rich sound that drew glances from other patrons. "Good. Children need to learn their parents are people, not furniture. I shocked my son terribly when I sold the family restaurant and bought a motorcycle. He still hasn't recovered, and that was 10 years ago." That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since college. I sat for an art class. The instructor set up easels in Plaza San Felipe Neri, and we painted the Baroque church facade with its pockmarked walls, scars from Civil War shrapnel that the city had never repaired. "Some wounds," the instructor said, "become part of the beauty." My painting was terrible, all wonky perspective and muddy colors, but the German woman next to me, Greta, complimented my bold use of shadow, and we ended up having dinner together, laughing over wine about our artistic failures and our children's shock at our solo travels. "My daughter thinks I've lost my mind," Greta confided. "She keeps sending me articles about elderly people and sudden personality changes, as if wanting to see Barcelona means I have dementia." "Mine hasn't gotten to medical diagnoses yet," I said. "She's still in the stage where she thinks I'm being deliberately cruel." "Are you?" Greta asked with a mischievous smile. I considered this, rolling the wine in my glass. I canceled their entire vacation, cost them thousands of dollars, left them stranded at the airport. So yes, I suppose by her standards, I'm being cruel. "And by your standards?" "By my standards, I'm being free." We toasted to that, two women who'd spent decades being reasonable, responsible, reliable, and had finally decided those words were just pretty cages. That night, I turned on my phone to find 47 missed calls and a string of text messages that had evolved from anger to something almost like panic. The last one, sent just an hour ago. "Mom, please, just let us know you're safe. We'll pay you back. We'll do whatever you want. Just come home." I looked out my hotel window at the Barcelona night, the city still alive with laughter and music at an hour when Portland would be tucked safely in bed. Tomorrow. I planned to visit the Sagrada Familia. Next week. Maybe I'd take the train to Valencia, or maybe I'd stay right here, in this small hotel where the night clerk had started greeting me by name, and the breakfast cook remembered I liked my eggs soft. I typed out a response, my first in days. I'm exactly where I want to be. Then I turned off the phone again. Let them parse that simple sentence for meaning. Let them wonder if I was talking about geography or something far more profound. Maria had been right. I wasn't running from anything. I was running toward a life I'd glimpsed in stolen moments but never had the courage to claim. And I was discovering, at 72, that my legs were stronger than anyone, including me, had ever imagined. The message came on my 10th day in Barcelona, while I was sitting at my usual table at Maria's cafe, practicing Spanish with a children's book I'd bought from a street vendor. My phone, which I now turned on only once a day to check for true emergencies, displayed a text from Lydia that was different from the others. "Mom, we're out of money. The house payment is due. Aaron's job is on the line because we missed so many days dealing with this mess. The kids need school supplies. Please, I'm begging you. We need help." I read it twice, waiting for the familiar guilt to rise like floodwater. Instead, I felt only a cool detachment as if reading about strangers in a newspaper. These were the consequences they'd never imagined when they'd planned their grand adventure on my dime. The bill had come due, just not in the way they'd expected. A second message followed. I know what we did was wrong, but you've made your point. You've punished us enough. The children don't understand why Grandma won't help us. The children, always the children, wielded like emotional weapons. Maria appeared with my cortado, glancing at my face. Bad news? My daughter wants money. I showed her the message. She read it, eyebrows rising. The same daughter who stole from you? The very same. And what will you do? I thought about it as I sipped my coffee. What would the old Maggie do? She'd fold immediately, wire the money, smooth things over, pretend the betrayal had never happened. She'd make excuses for Lydia, tell herself it was all a misunderstanding, that family was more important than money or pride. But I wasn't the old Maggie anymore. Barcelona had burned her away like morning fog. I think, I said slowly, it's time to send a postcard. Maria's gift shop next door had a perfect selection. I chose one with a view of the Mediterranean at sunset, the kind of image that belonged on travel dreams and bucket lists. On the back, I wrote in my careful script, currently enjoying my own European tour, the one I paid for myself. Perhaps you should have saved the money you stole instead of spending it on first-class tickets. Banks offer excellent financial planning services. I suggest you use one. Mel, but that felt too bitter, too much like the endless back and forth of accusation and defense. I tore it up and selected another card, this one showing the colorful tiles of Park Güell. This time I wrote only, having a wonderful time. Wish you were the kind of daughter who would be happy for me. Still not right. I was trying too hard to wound, to match hurt for hurt. That wasn't who I wanted to be in this new life. The third postcard showed a simple scene, a cafe table set for one, a glass of wine catching the light, a book open beside it. On this one, I wrote, Barcelona is beautiful. I'm learning Spanish and painting badly. Made friends with a German woman named Greta who motorcycles across Europe. Thinking of extending my stay. Hope you're all well. I signed it simply Mom and added Maria's Cafe as the return address. But I didn't mail it yet. Instead, I opened my phone's photo gallery and selected the best image from my morning at Sagrada Familia. Me, in my red dress, smiling genuinely in front of Gaudi's magnificent chaos. The light was perfect, catching the joy in my face, the confidence in my posture. I looked like a woman who belonged exactly where she was. I sent it to Lydia with a brief message. Spain agrees with me. Currently living the life I should have started years ago. Your father would have loved this place. The response was almost immediate. This is insane. You're acting like a teenager. What about your responsibilities? I typed back, what responsibilities? The house I paid off 20 years ago? The grandchildren you only let me see when you need babysitting? The garden that grows just fine without me? I'm 72, not dead, and I'm done being treated like an ATM with a pulse. We'll pay you back. Every penny. Just please come home and help us. No? No? That's it? Just no? I looked around the cafe, at the life happening all around me. An elderly man reading a newspaper at the next table. A young couple sharing breakfast and secrets. Maria behind the counter humming along to the radio. This was real life, happening right now, not waiting for someone else's permission or timeline. Actually, I typed, let me be clearer. No, I won't come home to fix the mess you created. No, I won't send money to people who stole from me. No, I won't pretend this never happened. And no, I won't feel guilty for choosing myself for once. I hit send, then added one more message. But I do hope you figure it out. You're smart and capable when you're not trying to take shortcuts through other people's bank accounts. Consider this a growth opportunity. Then I did something I should have done days ago. I blocked her number. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. No more buzzing interruptions. No more emotional manipulation disguised as concern. Just silence. Beautiful. Peaceful silence that I could fill however I chose. I paid Maria for my coffee and walked out into the Barcelona morning, at a shop selling art supplies. I bought a leather journal and a good pen. If Lydia wanted to know about my life, she could wait for postcards like everyone else, or better yet, she could wonder. My phone, freed from its burden of constant contact, felt lighter in my pocket. I pulled it out one more time to take a photo of the journal's first page, where I'd written, "Day 1 of whatever comes next." Then I tucked it away and lost myself in the winding streets of the Gothic Quarter, following the sound of guitar music and laughter, heading toward whatever adventure waited around the next corner, behind me, somewhere across an ocean. My daughter was learning what it felt like to be on her own. Welcome to adulthood. Lydia, it's about time we both arrived. The afternoon light in Plaza Real was perfect, filtering through the palm trees and casting shadows across my small table. I'd been in Barcelona for 3 weeks now, and my Spanish had progressed from non-existent to charmingly terrible. The waiter no longer automatically brought me an English menu, which felt like a small victory. My wine glass caught the light, creating tiny rainbows on the white tablecloth. I lifted it, watching the golden liquid swirl, thinking about nothing in particular and everything all at once. The guitar player in the corner was working through a classical piece, his fingers dancing across the strings with the kind of effortless skill that came from decades of practice. I'd unblocked Lydia's number that morning, not to reconnect, but to send one final message, a photo of my new apartment rental agreement, 6 months in Barcelona, with an option to extend. Let her digest that however she wished. The response had been swift, seen. Just that, one word that said everything about where we now stood. She'd seen my message. She'd seen my choice. She'd seen who I'd become. Good. My journal lay open beside me, pages filled with observations, sketches, pressed flowers from the park, ticket stubs from concerts and museums. I'd written about the morning I'd helped Maria open the cafe and she'd taught me to make proper cortado, about the night Greta and I had danced at a street festival until 2 a.m, laughing at our creaking knees, about the afternoon I'd stood in front of a Picasso at the museum and finally understood what he meant about destruction being a form of creation. Sometimes you had to tear down the old life completely to build something new. A couple at the next table was arguing in hushed tones about money, about family obligations, about who owed what to whom, the universal language of guilt and expectation. I could have leaned over, could have told them what I'd learned, that the only debt that truly matters is the one you owe to yourself. But they'd have to figure that out on their own, just as I had. My phone buzzed with a notification. Helen from next door, sending photos of my garden. The tomatoes were thriving, heavy and red on the vine. Save some for me. I typed back, "See you at Christmas. Maybe." Maybe. What a delicious word that had become. Maybe I'd go home for the holidays. Maybe I'd invite Greta to Maine instead. Maybe I'd spend Christmas on a beach in Portugal. Maybe it was freedom. The guitarist finished his piece and started another, this one livelier, drawing smiles from passing tourists. I closed my journal and simply sat, absorbing the moment, the taste of good wine, the warmth of late afternoon sun, the sound of languages mixing in the air like spices in a paella, the complete absence of anyone calling me too old for anything. This was what I'd purchased with my refusal. Not just a trip or an adventure, but a life lived on my own terms. Lydia thought I'd stolen something from her, but the truth was, I'd simply stopped allowing her to steal from me. Not just money, but dignity, agency, the right to fill my remaining years with whatever brought me joy. I raised my glass to the empty chair across from me, toasting Thomas, who would have loved this place. Toasting the woman I used to be, who'd kept me safe until I was ready to become someone else. Toasting Lydia, who'd inadvertently given me the push I needed by showing me so clearly what my life had been reduced to in her eyes. But mostly, I toasted myself. Margaret Holloway, 72 years old, drinking wine alone in a Barcelona plaza, wearing a red dress and absolutely thriving. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that no photograph could capture. Somewhere across the ocean, my daughter was dealing with the consequences of her choices, and here I sat, dealing with mine. I couldn't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. The waiter appeared, asking if I'd like another glass. Si, I said. My accent still terrible, but my smile genuine. Definitely si. Tomorrow I'd take that art class by the beach. Next week, maybe I'd start those tango lessons Greta had been pushing. Or maybe I'd do nothing at all except sit in cafes and watch the world go by. The choice was mine. Had always been mine. I just needed to be brave enough to make it. And as the Barcelona evening wrapped around me like a warm embrace, I knew one thing for certain. I'd finally stopped asking for permission to live. I was simply living. Neat. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're hearing this. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where you chose yourself? I'd love to hear about it.